Hello everyone, welcome to the second part of the Mirko remodel and repainting video. We finished the last video having finished the sculpting process. Like I mentioned last time, I wasn't really satisfied with the way the hair turned out. So I had purchased polymer clay. While I waited for it to arrive, I applied surfacer and primer to the figure. As you can see in the video, I applied primer only to the places that required them. Since I'm using lacquer paints, I apply primer to the spots that require it. In this case, it was mostly the sculpted area. I've also included the images of the surfacer and primer that I use just for reference or just in case you want to buy it. So yeah, go ahead, check it out. By the time this was done, the polymer clay had arrived and I was ready to try using it. I was hoping that the polymer clay would be easier to use compared to putty, but God was I mistaken. So I didn't realize and ordered the hard polymer clay. Shaping it and adding details is a little complicated and it takes quite a few tries to get it right. Also, using thinner is not a good idea since it does make the surface smooth but also makes it much harder to work. So I guess you can use thinner once you have finished your sculpting to maybe like remove any fingerprints or unnecessary marks that might be left on the clay, but it's not a good thing to use it while sculpting. So I did find out later that warming it up a bit with a hairdryer before sculpting makes it a little softer and easier to handle. Now of course you can't heat it to the point where it starts to cure, so just warm it up a little bit and you'll have soft clay. Now as you can see in the video, I made the hair twice with polymer clay before I was satisfied with the result. Thus, if I am to include the one that was made with putty, I had to make the hair thrice before I had something I was happy with. I'll confess it's not the best since this is the first time I'm working with polymer clay, but it is good enough. Once the baking was done, I sanded the part and prepared it for painting. I usually start with painting the base layer of the skin with an airbrush. Basically anything that requires an airbrush is painted first. Unfortunately, I couldn't add the recording of the video because the lighting was horrible and it wouldn't have been any use to add it. And on top of that, you're not really missing out on much because I had to paint over it anyways with a brush because I wasn't really happy with the base coat. It was too dark in my opinion, and the shade wasn't right, so I had to change the shade, and in order to do that I just went in with a brush and painted the whole thing again. So there's an advantage to painting with a brush, that is your paint is thick enough, or rather the layer of paint is thick enough to cover up the layer of paint below, and basically it covers it up in a way that it doesn't affect the top layer. Whereas if I was to use an airbrush, the layer of paint below would affect the layer on top. So a paintbrush helps you avoid those things. So yeah, once that was done, I moved on to cell shading, just went on adding more highlights to the figure, and that's basically how I paint all my figures. This one I decided to go from a darker shade to a lighter shade, which I do that with a lot of figures, but I think at the end of the day it's a personal preference. You could go either way. You could go light to dark or dark to light, or you could start with a medium shade and then you could go one shade darker and one shade lighter. It's totally up to you. Sometimes I actually do that. I would start with a medium shade, and then if I feel like I can add another layer of or I can add a darker layer, I would do that. But yeah, like I said, it depends on the figure. Then also, like, since this figure was not dismantled, it was like one complete piece. So I feel like going from the darker to the lighter shades kind of helps. In that way, like, I can cover a larger area with the darker shades rather than having to go in and carefully paint darker shades later. So once the darker shades are done, I can go in with the lighter shades and cover up the more exposed areas. Because like, to add the darker shades, like, you will mostly use them in places which are uh, not really accessible. I mean, it's not easy to get there with a paintbrush without messing up other areas. So in that case, it helps to go in with the darker shade so that you cover up the whole area. Then the brighter areas are mostly areas that are more exposed, so it's easier to paint them. Yeah, so once the skin was done, I moved on to painting the clothes, and the clothes were painted in purple. And yeah, it was quite good. I like the vibrant effect it creates, and I think it goes well with the shading of the body and the hair. The purple seems to be a good contrast, and yeah, add some cell shading to it, and that makes it really nice. So, like we talked in the previous video, this figure is actually quite good. I mean, it has that bodybuilding pose kind of look, and honestly, I'm really happy that I went with this decision to remodel. I generally don't do it, or rather, I don't. It's more like when you go into remodeling, you are taking a risk, because you might end up with a really good figure, or you might end up spoiling it. So it's a risk that you decide to take. And yeah, with this one, I'm happy to say that yeah, it was well worth the risk, and the result was pretty good. So yeah, if I'm to recollect, like, remodeling hasn't I mean, it's not really easy working with putty, and then, like, getting the right shape and everything is not really easy. And I have had troubles previously, but that was, I used to make some, how can I say, to put it in the least I mean, to put it in a way that is not really against the terms of YouTube. Okay, what the hell? I used to work with figures, and basically make uh, make adult versions, or yeah, just simple modifications. You get the idea, like, make them erotic kind of. So I used to do that at some point, but then I stopped, because again, it takes a lot of work. Even with this figure, as you've seen, it took quite a lot of time to get it to this point, and then finally do the painting. And honestly, the painting did not take that long. The painting was, if you compare it to the rest of the sculpting and remodeling, the painting was the shortest part. It took me around 2 weeks to sculpt the whole thing, but the painting took me like 1 or 2 days. I think 2 days maximum. One day was just painting the whole thing and letting it sit, and the second day was applying a top coat and then going in for the details. So actually less than 2 days, and we were done. So yeah, but that kind of varies according to the size, and I don't really modify big figures, because that it's complicated, and yeah, there are more chances of spoiling them, and then when the figures are big, you are spending more money on them. So I just feel like I'm not yet ready to take that kind of risk. But either way, the remodeling and the painting, it's interesting. I kind of, now that I've done this, I want to get more into it and see what else I can experiment with, and hopefully we'll have more videos like this and more interesting things for people to watch. So yeah, once the painting was done, I went in and added the eyes and the rest of the detailing with black, which I could not record because when I'm doing those things, I hold the figure very close to my face, and it's not possible to record in that kind of situation. Maybe I'll be able to do it in the future, but as of now, it's not possible to get a good recording while doing those things. So yeah, here you have the final result, which honestly it's quite good. I love it. If I am to express my opinion, I really like the way it turned out, and yeah, it's awesome. It gives off that bodybuilder feel. It has the costume or the clothes, to say the least, and it looks really awesome. The muscles are amplified. You can see the details. It's crazy. It's good. So all in all, this is a success. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the video. If you have any comments or any suggestions, any questions, anything, go ahead and leave a comment. Drop a like if you enjoyed watching the video and listening to me ramble about figures and sculpting and everything. So yeah, that's pretty much it from me. I hope you really enjoyed this video. I hope you join me for future videos, and yeah, I see that my subscriber count has gone up, so welcome to everyone who's new to the channel. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you enjoy the content. And yeah, that's it. That's all for today. Thank you, and have a nice day.